But I think he doesn't. Oh,
Which one was the bunch Hanger?
what about him?
Which one was it?
Hanger one.
And then it would have been pure again.
And it was no, then it was Odyssey. Then
It's fluid.
they had a very smooth show that day.
I had to do the oral too. Yep, we're taking one for the team.
Yeah, I know. There's that, and then yeah. I don't know. Personally, I kind of like those more horror stories though, so I feel that's why I liked.
Oh, I thought it had potential, like
Oh,
it
for
did.
sure.
But a lot of the addiction and then the screaming in the crowd seems to lost what's going on.
The crowd scenes, I think.
That one's a little.
Yeah, I was even right. It's just those are just hard to play out in different locations. You know what I mean? When you don't know the theater, you don't.
Yep.
You just don't really know how to move. I really liked I just thought they did a good job using that minimal set and working. I like the show. You're getting to know that's
No.
I understand.
Right.
I just watched and I was like, I don't know what this means. And then I tried to Google it and I'm like, that still doesn't
I think you just have one check.
Well, Pierre leaves and travels the world and finds out
Backside of
maybe
that.
they should have stayed at home. He had a much better life. He's
Well,
involved.
I think he cheated on his
Swear to
wife,
you.
but then
Too
he
much
just
responsibility.
stayed.
Oh yeah, Solvig is the saint.
Please rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Let the roll call show that all members are present. Are there any citizen comments up there? I did not look at the sheet.
I don't believe so.
There are no citizen comments. We will move right into board committee reports. Let's start with Howard.
Community Ed advisory meeting and eventually minutes are going to come out. But highlight is they talked a lot about more participation in a lot of the community ed things. A couple of things we paired with Cambridge for Adults, so we both could do it. And discussion on Spanish immersion. And then I officiated at the 7AA1X that were here in Princeton. And just to comment on Rich Phillip, who ran a really wonderful meet. It was slick. It was treated everyone well. All the casts and directors kind of raved about how slick it was. So we walked out smelling like a rose on that.
Chad?
Nothing from me. Went to my first Rum River Co-op meeting and got my feet wet.
Good.
Ready to go.
Good. I had agenda planning last week with Deb on Wednesday, and Monday through Wednesday, I had the pleasure of attending Deep Portage field trip with my daughter and about 95 or 100 other sixth graders. So that was fun. Interesting.
Great hair.
Bonding.
I have a great appreciation for middle school teachers.
I had executive planning also last Wednesday, and then we just had a finance meeting before this meeting, and all of our items I think are on the agenda except for maybe tennis courts. So we should be getting some kind of an answer. We're hoping in March. So other than that, that's it.
Finance.
I was also at finance, and a week ago on Friday, I was at the C General Membership Meeting. We had a professor from the University of Minnesota talk about reading, and then Senator Carla Nelson and Representative Cheryl Ukeem were grilled by the superintendents, lots of discussion about special ed funding and cross subsidy and those kinds of things. If you're interested in reading, Dr. Lori Hellman, it was a really good presentation and probably one Jessica could benefit from. You can see those on the C website.
I also attended the policy meeting. I forgot that, so.
That was 2 weeks ago, Jim. That was last time.
All right, student council report. Ellie?
All right, yeah. So the week of January 20th was our snow days week, which was a little difficult because we had Monday off and then we had Wednesday off. But we chose to focus on giving back to the community like we do for our snow days week, and we decided to choose Paws Up for You in town, and we were able to raise around $300 from selling ice cream and popcorn and other things throughout the week. So we were able to present a giant check to them at the Pet Fest, which was exciting. And then today we discussed how at the end of the month, we really want to put together a mental health and health awareness week. And each day of the week, we're going to focus on a different aspect of that and just focus on making sure that our students are taking care of themselves.
One little agenda, Minnesota School Board Association is awarding two $3,000 scholarships to student representatives on the board. And I am encouraging Ellie to apply for that.
Yeah, that would be great. And we can, Ellie, if that's something you'd like to pursue, you know, we can write letters on your behalf. And I had the pleasure when I was in Caledonia superintendent that our student board member received that. And that was a great honor.
Mr. Tomsky gave me the paperwork, so I'm getting to work on it.
Good. Right. Superintendent report.
Very excited to have our presentation tonight. Just want to thank everyone for coming. It's been a pleasure, and it's just been so awesome to see the community come together for such an important cause. So I just think lots of gratitude and thankfulness from our part to them. I think words really can't express how thankful we are. So I know you're all looking forward to it, to hearing the group tonight as well. Last time we met with MSBA for board development. I thought it was a great session, and we came away with several items that we feel like we can have as takeaways for continuous improvement. I'm hopeful that at our next work session, we can discuss next steps that we will take as a result of that. One of the things that we learned from that is there was a piece that talked about the board's and superintendent's role in educating our public on what our role is. And to that end, that was the column that I write for the Union Times. That was the theme of that. So I don't know if that's being run this week or next week, but if you catch that, it's about the role of the school board. And I used a lot of the resources from MSB to help us with that. So, that's already moving on a takeaway from our board development session. I've had lots of opportunities to meet with legislators lately. I've had a chance to meet with Representative Erickson the other day. I wanted to share with her specifically some of the work we've done locally on some of the building pieces, because I know that she has lots of constituents that will communicate with her. So wanted to make sure she was informed. And yesterday we had an opportunity to meet with a Congressman Stauber, who right now, as we're talking, is probably in the State of the Union in Washington, D.C. He was here with us yesterday, and we had a chance to visit and share some of our thoughts with him. So that was good. Had a chance to meet with the high school student advisory group to the superintendent last week. The theme of our conversations really mostly was on facilities, so I was able to get additional information from them and their perspectives there. Had coffee and conversation today with the public. We're continuing on with our soup with the superintendent at the different buildings, and that's been very successful. So I'm happy I'm doing that, and that's going to continue. And just one piece that I just want to make you aware of that I'll probably be sharing more with you on, and I share it with you now because it could potentially cross. Someone could potentially talk to you about this. We don't know exactly what we're going to do at this point, but our elementary schools, is specifically primary school, but primary and intermediate, we're constantly trying to improve our safety and security in those settings. And if you come in to either of those buildings from when the day starts to when it ends, it's kind of like Fort Knox. It's hard to get in, right? But, as we've been analyzing things, we've, really uncovered that we're not secure at all for about 20 minutes in the morning when everyone's dropping their children off and at the end of the day. And we've had some really strong learning experiences recently on that, and we're anticipating some changes in our procedure as it relates to that, which could potentially cause some inconvenience to parents who want to walk their child in every morning into the classroom. But any measure that we take will really be based on purely the safety and security of our students and knowing who's in and out of our buildings at all times. So just want you to know that we're doing work on that, and we will do our best. I'll keep you posted. So I'll end my remarks. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
A motion made by Eric Mink, seconded by Howard Valancourt. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Discuss and act on the previous board minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So
Second.
A motion made by Jim Tomsky, seconded by Sue Van Hooser. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
A motion made by Deb Alm, seconded by Howard Valancourt. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's move on to the long-range planning presentation.
Michelle, what do I have to do to repower up?
And as they're getting
Tigers.
as they're getting set up here, just to set the stage for the board, and I say this not because you know this already, but I think it's important to set the stage, right? The board, you have directed us to move forward with a process in which we could hear the people's voice, and we were able to work with Wold to come up with what we think is a really good process to include as many voices as we can in the community. It started off with 3 criteria groups that set the criteria, basically identified all of the different needs or problems that would need to be solved or questions that we would need to answer. And then that rolled into an options committee that really worked on different options to solve some of the criteria needs. And then we also had a finance committee that met as well. We've been working, seems like for a few months now, 3 or 4 months. And we've had last count about 100 people in all participate in some level or another on this. So here we are somewhat, as this is a culmination of that work, and they're going to share a recommendation based upon all of their different sessions with you tonight. And you will also know that we will have a community meeting that will be next Tuesday evening that we will invite and try and get as many people from the community to come and hear and give feedback and ask questions. And then the board may or may not have this as a question that they would vote on at our following board meeting, which would be February 8th. So we'll turn it over.
Great. And that's a great recap of the process. If you look at the red arrow, that's where we are right now. So tonight, we're going to go through some of that criteria again, even though we've seen it before, just to reframe it and go through the options. And in the meantime, we've had We had a great committee, including the 5 people here, and Kit. We wasn't sure she'd be able to make it or not, so she didn't get to speak in role, but here for support. But I'll have everybody introduce themselves, and we'll go from there.
I'm Susan, I'm a new member and volunteer. One time I taught in class and worked part-time in the ed and very interested in lifelong.
Jack Edmonds, I'm a lifetime resident, coming up on 70 years this summer. For the record, I do serve on the Turkey Police Council, but I have an old way teaching for the same year. Well, I was involved with the last referendum. I get back to the community when I have time now. I did when I was younger as a kid. I've had a busy my whole life. I graduated in 1958 from the part of the land that hopefully going to get remarked.
I'm Elvin Johnson. I was like that since I came to go way back and I've been involved in referendums and letters since 1972. There's been some hassles along the way, but I'm in favor of it. I'm interested in anything.
We had a number of different representatives there. You can see the full list, including Angelo, student in the buildings, who asked a lot of really good questions along the way. And have you looked at this, and why aren't we thinking about this? So we were able to have some student representation on the committee too as well, and a number of district resources. We asked the district resources superintendents, I know some of the board members were at a couple of meetings, we have principals at different meetings, to really be there to help answer how do things work, what are the challenges you face, but not necessarily drive the options of the discussion. So they were very impartial in the process as we went along. I will go through some of the criteria, because if you remember, the criteria set the tone for these are the things that each of the committees said, whatever you look at for options has to resolve these issues. And rather than go through it in full detail, because you've seen it before, the way we framed it for the committee was we circled the things in red that were very specifically related to what might be have to be looked at in terms of options or facilities, because these criteria might cover lots of different things. Some of it might be operational, some of it might be setting standards. So for example, for the physical conditions group, one of the components they said there was, we know there's a lot of work being done at the high school, but anything we do should be looked at in the context of other initiatives. Instead of just replacing mechanical systems, while you've got things taken apart, look at, do you need to renovate or remodel that space as you go through? So that was an important one. Another component for physical conditions criteria, all facilities should have secure vestibules. And so this was going back to the security work that we did 6 years ago. The high school, the office is the only building where it's still inboard to the building. We have an attendance window and a secure vestibule there, but moving administration was one of the focuses, as well as, it's not really a surprise, traffic safety is still a concern at buildings, and the high school's got sort of a mess of a parking lot, especially around events, and so that came up as a priority as well. And in terms of site, we spent a lot of time talking about the fact that we know the high school site is small compared to MDU guidelines, but that acquiring adjacent property to solve problems wasn't probably the right solution. And so that any of the options should think about how do we work with the site we have, and in long term, can the district consider when property becomes available that's contiguous to sites, look at it and see if it has merit or value as we go through it. So that kind of framed the physical conditions criteria. Oh, do you want to say anything on that?
So we worked on the long-range plan. The quality level of the options are similar to what we went through in 2015. And we wanted to expand on that to the issue of ourselves. And that was the major thing that we didn't do in the last round. Is obviously that this whole thing that we do the high school and take care of the issues that we fought with over the years. So I think it's a good plan that Vaughn and Joy can come up with. They've really done a lot of work on it, and they really worked it over, trying to get in line with their thoughts.
We try not to strong arm unless absolutely necessary.
Okay.
In turn, oh, there was one more for this physical community. I forgot there was a fourth slide that really said make sure technology is integrated too, which would be common sense as well. In terms of educational criteria, we started with the group re-illustrating probably the most compelling slide that we had done with the criteria group, and that was looking at the size of existing spaces within the buildings and how they compare to NDE state guidelines for new construction if you're building new. And pink would be spaces that are at least 10% below those guidelines, in some cases quite a bit below those guidelines. And you can see the high school has a lot of those. The intermediate school, they're actually located on the south side of an entry, and so they're related to special spaces in the cafeteria.
So I'll confess, I have never been in the school because I haven't had any yet. But when I joined the options committee in the fall, what classrooms and multi-line, I wonder how we can provide the level of education that a student needs if we haven't given them the physical resources to learn. And so that would be what we, and when the specialist issues in these areas in the school, that's really out there, so let's think about them. And so, I got it from that side of things too, but, let's start settle off with.
So working off the educational criteria, one of the primary ones that that group came up with was classroom areas, no matter the building, need to be appropriately sized. And so that was responding directly to that, that analysis. And also that the special education spaces in the buildings, oftentimes they're leftover spaces, they're spaces special ed's been making do with, and we need to take a look at how special education needs are met through renovations within the building. This slide was interesting in that the educational group really focused on the high school and said that's where we've got a ton of needs, and it was very specific in terms of not only the size of classrooms, but the shop areas, the width of the corridors, just the overall educational environment, and mostly around that original 1964 building, last renovated in 1986, going through. But the intermediate school also had the issues. As I mentioned, the specialist areas south of the entry where you come in, not only do you have to go through a very small cafeteria to get there, but a lot of those were never meant to be music rooms or STEM rooms, and so they aren't laid out that way. And the student services building, it's fantastic to have, but there's some classrooms where the walls don't even go up to the ceiling, and the cafeteria is really, it's a community fellowship hall, so it's got carpeting, and it's not set up or laid out the way you want a high school cafeteria set up, and if it had more multi-purpose, it could really do more things over the course of the day and be used for a wider number of varieties. Sue, you want to maybe talk a little bit about the core of that building?
Yeah, the high school. It's been a long time since I've been in high school, but I think my high school probably was some vintage, but I feel that the older that school was, it had a better functional design and better feeling for the people using the building than that old for the high school here has. And I think that is a everybody credit for making things work when the state's really knows not really doing everything it needs to do now. And I think that, and I'll have other comments later about specific pieces that I think are really not the best for our students, and not only from the point of how they're getting their learning, how to teach students, but also, how they may feel valued or not valued as students. I come from a banking career where I remember in the older days, people in the operations department went to the basement, they were upstairs out of sight. And, you kind of start acting like you're maybe not as valuable because you're working in those less than desirable places and in facilities and open things up and had a lot of open space and windows to the outside. And those people moved up to the floor and thought, wow, we like it. We leave them and actually raise that here and it's their self-esteem and their efforts to do their jobs and do themselves. And that's kind of a lot of comments, but I think we may be long enough, I think no one should have to apologize for anything to do. As long as, the improvements that we need here to make sure they can find it. And I think that's gonna make sure there still are some priorities that we need to address. I think there was collective agreement that there are certain non-negotiables that as we're looking at all of our district buildings, we need to ensure that we every building, as long as the primary focus of student services is that we don't have that overlay here. So we try to change it and the cafeteria area having services that we need to find that we don't find it and allow us to use it throughout the day, which we should change. And then the media school is certainly used to a lot of the STEM and other activities that are then carried on throughout the district. So they can see it in the media school that allow the teachers to take on these activities and do them in the
And Eldon probably had the funniest comment of the entire process.
And we're doing our tours, and honestly, I haven't been in the shop area since there was that TV. I walked in and they said, just go on, like, it's 35 years. And it's tough. I mean, obviously, everything is so outdated there, I think it's just the local bulldozer and figure out, start over. I mean, there's really no way you can, do anything with that, so what they need to do, well, that's something like that, we can, that's something to take on that one.
And then the third committee was activities and community use. And we know that if you think about the schools as only being used during the school day, they actually probably see a wider variety of use, not only after school for student activities, but also how the community uses it. And so we spent a lot of time talking about, again, the high school was the primary focus for a lot of this discussion. We've got areas that are left over from the original building. The PE locker rooms are in the basement of the old 64 building, nowhere near where the gyms are. We've got sports activities spread out throughout the building. We don't have enough practice space. And so a lot of the criteria focused on how we can get those activity spaces up to speed, as well as thinking long-term about the future. And one of them was the need for synthetic turf on the practice fields because the site is so small, and that would actually not only give additional game use, but extend the wear and the life of the other playing surfaces. And it could be master planned for in the future, things like you could put a dome over it if somebody came in and said we'd like to have indoor practice space in the winter. So those could be provided for us as we went through. We also had medium criteria that knowing in the process was going to have to be prioritized. Looked at, well, what are the other things that we should be thinking about or planning? The idea of a community center still continues to resonate with the group, but I think that there was consensus that the district's probably not the right entity to be able to solve this for the community. It's either a city process or a shared joint venture process when the community moves forward to that point. Traffic flow, again, after activities was a high focus for the group. And then low, this was interesting, the group saying, we've made physical improvements at the pool. We know an 8-lane pool, separate dining wall would be a better environment, but right now it's not our highest priority. Same thing, we'd love to have baseball and softball on site, but we don't want to kick people out of their homes to get that done. And so they worked with this criteria and said, we know what the important issues are, go forward. And Jack was on the activities committee, and so he was a good voice for this process.
Particularly also again for really and I graduated in 1968 in the core of Denver High School. And other than the Pac Center and the gymnasium, I have probably never been to that building since that time. And one of the first things we did was we went to the activity area where they have good bathrooms, can't speak for everybody that was in that room, but I was moving over it. But it's unacceptable. What they're going through in that in my opinion. So that immediately, in my mind, became my highest priority. No matter what we do here, we have to improve that. You know, if it was the industrial arts and stuff, and I'm fully supportive of that. And there's community connections there. The expansion of the Butte area to the west was gonna take in some amenities for like football games or activities, whether it be indoor restroom facilities, cafeteria. So yeah, I really like the plan that Bonnie
Let's jump forward to plan then. The first meeting was really, in the face of this much criteria, there's going to be a lot of discussion. Okay, how are we going to go about this? What are we going to tackle? And so there was a lot of conversation back and forth. And while this isn't meant to be, this is the only topics, I think these were a good overview. So I'll have the group talk a little bit about each one of those, and then we'll get into what the option looks like.
So I came to what was a little longer meeting and election. Congratulations, you all are now the options. But what became very clear was that the work of the three committees that brought us together in the options committee, and then the work that was done previously in the building primary school is a great foundation for what needs to happen now. And truly in that foundation is a plan for what needs to happen. And that really needs to be our focus. There are the small improvements that we can make to the intermediate school and to the student services, but the primary and intermediate middle schools are in an absolute place right now. And it's hard to and it is consensus, and that is,
That's okay.
I think it's a good decision. They need to be the high school and making sure you get it to the high school. What is that already? There's going to be really certain things that they don't know about. As part of this process, so that we have to be virtual in what we are actually
And here, you probably said it, when we did the 2013 one, and I was on, I think, 4 of those committees, and finance committee at the end. And, a lot of these issues were discussed, so we were so focused on, we have to get that primary school done. That's not just what we want. And we need to get that done. That was all we were focused on. But a lot of these are not good. We just get old.
And some of the issues with high school, normal community members might not even be aware of. If it comes to pads or football field or something, and go up with pieces. Over my words, I can only imagine with all the kids going up at once, my comparison is the Paris subway and
I think it's a little wider.
But I mean, you're crowded and I mean, I didn't get to do that. All down and enjoy yourself or, you know, for all kinds of things that you don't want to happen in the school to happen. And even the corridors are not that wide. I know one time I was in, several years ago, and there was, you know, people were changing classrooms and, you know, there was not really a lot of space. And I can't imagine how you get from, you know, one floor to another very quickly. And then we were told during these meetings that, you know, finding time to go to the restroom because, well, either they're closed or you have to go way across the building to use the bathroom. And then we heard about how crowded the cafeteria is and you want to eat lunch, you want to stand in line and get a hot lunch, you want to use the restroom, you want to talk to your friend, you don't have a lot of options. And it's, you know, just a lot of, yeah, in addition to, but really bothers me most about it, it's just like a dark place. It is not a place that makes you feel energized and happy to be in it. And kind of reminds you of a prison. And I was talking to one of my friends who's going to be graduating, and she said, yeah, I can think it's like a prison and really. And one room where we do have a window, this time of year the sun comes in and it's blinding me. So I wasn't the only one that thought it was creepy.
We had a lot of discussion and people are talking about, why they just crash the whole thing and start over. Bombing the boys, come up with some numbers and just the building on the square footage has been populated would be pushing $100 million. And you gotta buy property, you have to buy infrastructure, you do something like 125, 30 million. So we've got some investors in that building now that I think they've come up with a fantastic plan for renovating the interior parts to get away from all the ventilation problems, all of that stuff, just putting some new systems in that'll take care of the whole facility. So I'm really impressed with what they've done.
I think we've seen our neighboring districts have similar referendums to build the high school, to make significant renovations, and so we've taken higher. We talked about what our enrollment numbers are and how we continue to make things really attractive to people moving their families here and staying engaged in the community. And that hinges right now on and what efforts we put into that building in the very near future. And so we heard several times over and over again, if we have to stay competitive, we need to stay consistent with what students want. I don't want our students to leave. And that's the spaces that we're talking about redesigning.
So pretty easy to figure out options from that, not a lot of vague issues or.
Yeah.
I joke a little bit. So what we did is we started with the easiest building and said, all right, what's the high building side?
Student services.
So for example, at student services, we knew all the work that has to take place is for the most part in this area of the building. Doesn't mean that there's not some other smaller things, but bring the walls up to the ceiling, taking the carpet out of the cafeteria, making some basic improvements and everything. That's an easy one for us to focus on. So park that to the side, move to the intermediate school and focus on, we know the special education areas need to be renovated, so we can price that. Now, how would you fix what's on the south side? So one of the things that we are proposed, and we kind of do this and said, we can look at other options, but for groups and not, let's stay with that one. We took the kitchen and said, let's build a new kitchen so we can take over all that kitchen space, some of the old dishwashing space, everything else, and essentially make the cafeteria about twice the size of what it is currently. It also allows us to create dedicated circulation to get back to those specialist areas so you don't have to go through the cafeteria and fight the cafeteria traffic to do that. It also opens up a few more venues out into the locker bays that improves overall circulation. And then while we're doing that, we can look at the specialist areas, potentially expand those areas as needed, make them appropriate for music, for some of those things. And originally, we didn't have the gym included because we said, the gym is, you can't make it bigger without tearing down that entire side of the building. Do you want to do that or not? Knowing that most of your staff is only the high school or other buildings, and every gym is the middle school. And so we weren't going to do anything there, but they said, if we're keeping that, we need to fix it at least. Let's put some better flooring in. Let's improve the lighting. Let's improve some of the areas. Right now, we got water coming up to the ground. We need to fix that. So we added in existing gym improvements to that building. So here's an approach for how we would handle these projects. It works well with the site, or it doesn't have to make improvements to the site. But so we agree that this is the approach for these buildings to settle on these two first.
Well, I think Bon's not the gym was bigger,
Sure.
but, again, we have to start looking at priorities, we start getting up into the dollar amount, and again, we want something, we're gonna put something out there that's so hopefully bad. Get things done, I just wanted to, Jennifer, make a point, and this is my approach, going like city council position, county board, and I was on there. And I look at long range plans, I don't, well, what's your goal, No, I say, what is need, what do we want, right? This is a need, this is how we want.
I think that improving the cafeteria space, make that, we've been making these for a long time, would be a really great compromise. And great improvement, and make it easier for the students to use the spaces where now they have to all their waste in the cafeteria and then other, so I think that's an
Next year, this is really kind of moving, and it does have good goals, there's a lot still to offer, we just need to think of some years and fellowship side, and the instructional space, and for a limited amount of money, we can.
So then it was on to the high school and tackling the high school. And so I'll walk you through it. Again, this focuses a lot of this, that square, that's the original 1964 building. And if you remember, that was a gym on the first floor, upper level was classrooms surrounding it. So that gym area has been filled in with other spaces. The nice thing is the structure that was a gym originally is still the core of what's holding up that building. So you can take out those interventions from the 80s and redo something else in there. So it gave us a lot of flexibility when we started thinking about that building. So I'll just walk you through the different components of it, starting at the front door, and we'll go from there. And these aren't prioritized in any order. First thing is moving the admin area out towards the front of the building and having that with the attendance window so that when visitors come into the building, it's all the secure office in that location. It does move student services then over to where the current admin space is, which allows for greater student services space. And then it takes the media center out of the core of the building and pushes it over adjacent to the common space. And one of the ideas behind that is the students are already eating in the media center. And that's a big trend we've seen with a lot of high schools, is changing those media centers from an enclosed space that's locked down before and after school into something that you secure books, but you leave the seating areas open. You make that part of that cafeteria environment or that common environment so that students can be using that space at all hours of the day when the building's open. The community can be using that space. So move it closer to that area. It also expands the kitchen, which will allow for some more flexibility in terms of the serving lines there. Then going into the main part of the building, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, taking out the 4 stairwells, tiny stairwells in the corners, and creating 2 much larger stairs to bring students up and down. Building classrooms in the media center space with circulation that's wider, taking out existing corridor walls and widening the circulation on both the main level and the upper level, building more full-size classrooms. So this takes almost entirely every one of those 650 to 700 square foot classrooms and makes them 850 to 900 square feet. Because there's a skylight that was put in there that still brings daylight down into that core of the space. Special education will be renovated as part of the physical maintenance improvements, the building needs new boilers. So instead of putting boilers back in this area, building a new boiler plant that actually would serve the heating circulation system better in this location, as well as the chiller plant. Taking down the old metal shops and building new shop areas. In 2014, connected up to the building, so it's new security, this would now create new shop spaces in that location. And then off this part of the building, expanding all of the activities programs. So a new gymnasium expansion off of the gyms that were done in 2014. Moving what's the multi-purpose room, which right now is serving a number of different purposes, converting that into a more functional gym that would be used primarily for wrestling. Building another gym out in this location that will take the place of the gymnastics equipment, so creating dedicated spaces for each of those. Looking at different types of flooring to make that more of an all-weather gym to expand that. So now you have 2 additional gyms, bringing the total count of gyms up to 5 plus a strong multi-purpose gym, and then ripping down the storage room that's being used as a weight room and making a new weights, cardio, fitness area, as well as concession lobby and expanding the locker rooms, so pulling the locker rooms up out of the lower level. Another thing that this would provide would be when people park here to go out to the stadium, you can actually bring them through the building from that corridor and have interior restrooms, concession space, lobby space, for stadium beings happening right here in outdoor plaza. So instead of making investments in the old ticket building and putting bathrooms there, where you have to winterize, have them be inside as part of the building so that you use them for the events. People out late with a very similar approach to their building. What else in this? Restriping parking for buses on this part of the building, creating some entry points in, so separate the buses out from the building. And then money set aside for not only making some improvements to traffic, but also providing synthetic turf at both the stadium as well as the practice field, which means that all sports can play on those fields really within 5 minutes of a heavy rainfall. You don't have to worry about the wear and tear on them, so it increases your practice time available on the site as well. We figured that we were going to have to revise this diagram a couple of times, but the committee again said we want to do something just like that, so we tweaked a couple of minor things, so we didn't go into looking at a lot of different variations. This isn't intended to be a plan, it's a diagram to help us with budgeting and scope. But it really says, let's cut the core of that central building, expand activities to accommodate those needs, and reduce physical conditions within the building around heating and cooling systems. So that's an overview of the high school. I know that got a lot of thoughts on that.
Well, I commend Ron and the influence for what they come up with. It certainly makes sense to me that a good time to relegate the building that method and manner. So with all of the things that you described, there's obviously a big problem in that building. So I'm kind of excited about it.
Elton touched on this a little bit earlier as well, but the question came up a couple of times. This is a lot of work to go there. What if we write this like and do a brand new high school? What do we do? The brand new high schools in Minnesota are paying between $90 and $110 million.
So we kind of ran numbers on this and said, okay, knowing how many square feet you have and using the MD guidelines as well as your enrollment projections, it said if we assume 1,150 students grades 9 through 12 at 188 square feet per student, not including that was with your existing students. So you're at about 188. If you take the auditorium and the pool off, which the MD does, you're at about 162 square feet. The MD says you should have at least 185 square feet for high school students with those two out. You can see it's a little small when you factor those things in. So we went through and said, if we went 285 per grade, that gets us up to 1,140 students. Just use 185 square feet. So we said, take the minimum, the MD guidelines, came up with a base, add again, replacing the pool in the auditorium, because if you're going to replace the high school, you can't leave those two there without sewer system. So build those in, and then at about 275 to $300 a square foot, that comes out to be in the neighborhood of 75 million, and then you have to have project costs on top of it, have to have land, unless you're gonna somehow fit it in on that site as it is, you rebuild the stadium as part of that, so that gets up to that number. We want to do that because when you're looking at renovation costs, one of the benchmarks we always use is if renovation is going to be at least 60% of what new construction is, there used to be an NDE guideline for saying you should replace that building. If you remember, that was a big part of the discussion itself. We're not at that point. And when we just take a look at things like the activity spaces, we're not at that point. And when you start to weigh what would new construction cost, you can see it quickly gets into very expensive territory. I can't say whether it's affordable or not, but it changes the question. So we wanted to come back and give an answer to that for the group.
I think that gives our high school students all the same resources and accessibility to options and opportunities that brand new high school could get them. Because this place touches on all of those areas at a third of the cost. And you know what, it took the St. Cloud School District how many tries to have the $1 million referendum for, there's 100,000 people with their population.
Well, yeah, I just, at the risk of getting bought, I really want to commend you for the next year. We had some meetings before the plans came out. And I was real skeptical how you're gonna do it. And I was amazed at it. He didn't pay me enough.
I will say, when you've gone to school in the building and you remember it as a student, because it hasn't changed a whole lot, when you start to get into what are we going to do here, the things come pretty quick, and you go, oh, I know what that is, and I know what that is, and I know where some of these things are that we have to tweak and fix. And so that's one time the advantage of having gone to a building.
The discussion of field house came in, few more times, I guess. Of course, this is just a step, but there's potential for some community involvement there. And again, for us, the field house kind of didn't really get right.
And I think what was interesting during the process, when we asked about field house, what we found was everybody's perception of what field house meant was different. We had some people who thought a field house is a dome over synthetic fields. Some dedicated multi-purpose space, with creating spaces inside for people, with consolidating and expanding locker rooms. And in the end, this ends up doing all those things that field house or community center would do. And just like this gym was designed to expand in the future, you can always expand this one in the future too. So if you want to keep adding gyms to it in the future, it's planned and designed for the future.
How much more gym space would that section add?
For which
For the,
That
that
field
one,
house
yeah,
one.
up on
these
the,
are both sized to be at least full-size basketball courts. This one probably needs to be a little bit larger just to fit the components that gymnastics would take in this. But we were very careful in talking about each one of these spaces and saying, this isn't a gymnastics gym, this isn't a wrestling gym. These have to be spaces that can be disassembled and put back together in a way that makes sense. Yes, having gymnastics set up there most of the time will work, but you can take that down when you want to have that bigger tournament. This space, if it's wrestling, their equipment rolls up a little bit easier. That operable wall is still in place, so you can still use that for graduation and some of the other events. And in increasing the flooring in there, you can make that a fitness space, you make a dance space. And so each one of those became an opportunity to expand more than just basketball, for example, or to focus only on one type of sport.
Vaughn, does the number of classrooms remain the same?
Classrooms remain the same, so actually, I think we were net one additional one. So it picks up one classroom in the process and doing it. We couldn't decrease the capacity of any of the buildings.
One of the nice things, there's always the balance of education and activities among diversity. And I think this plan really has a lot of balance between community activities and community activities that we're doing with it. As well as the students and providing students opportunities and getting them ready for their next step, whether it's in college, a trade school, or the workforce. It's just kind of balance everything and, without going totally over the top on the budget.
You know, which, that's always the big piece is, well, what will this cost? And we went into this not knowing, okay, where do we want to land? Last go around, 30 million was the number. We knew that before we started. The community, that number was out there, but we didn't have that this time. And so in some ways, the problem wasn't quite as clear, but we did have a gut saying, it can't be $100 million probably. We need to think about this. And so we started pricing up, and there was a range to each of these and saying, when you see the price tag attached to any one of these components, do you want to start prioritizing? Do you want to look at anything else? And at first the committee said, no, we don't want to do that. We want to do everything. But then we started getting pushy and saying, okay, well, I'm going to make you take $5 million off right now. What do you want to take out? And we got there. That was probably the most tense conversation, just trying to force the committee to take some things out. And we went down the list, and they really said, if we had to, we could maybe get down to around 45 million, but those are needs. And can we present that as these are things that we think are needed? And so we said, okay, we will. We'll go to the finance committee and work with the district to get that set up. And through discussions with them, they said, looking at what the tax impact might be and how this would be approached. And there is information on tax impact that they would put together for this. We believe that needs to be below $50 million. That's probably where we are today in terms of a group. And so even though we had the group prioritize down to 45 million, their real pressure point was in that sort of 48 to $50 million range. And so it hit right exactly where the finance committee said this is what we believe would be a tolerable amount for the community. And so those are the components to it. There are some questions around, do we have to provide furniture? Furniture and equipment in buildings is so much a part of what educational design is now that didn't exist even 5 to 10 years ago. They've really come a long way in terms of how furniture creates collaborative spaces, how it can change those classrooms. Technology is obviously a critical part to anything that we do. We did have some more deferred maintenance as part of this, but the group said we really want the district to continue using the 2 and 10-year plan and LTFM approach for dealing with physical conditions and have this be focused on what we need to do from a renovation standpoint. And so that was an item that came off.
Have you thought about what to do with the students while the renovation is going on?
Yeah, that's going to be the trickier part.
Because I mean, that could add to the cost.
Yes, it could. Probably we're going to look at things that the activity pieces really don't have a huge impact because they're additions to the building, and they don't have to be done for the fall. Specifically, so not to worry about moving dates. We can work around sports activities, but there's a lot of flexibility in those components. We would look at how you take spaces like the shop areas and do those over the course of the summer, so you do them. But this core improvements to the building likely takes place over 2 summers. And then anything else in the building that we feel like we've got some level of flexibility where we can say we can have some access to these rooms or that room, maybe some restrooms we might do during the school year. Otherwise, we would be looking at doing most of the interior renovation work in the 64 building over the course of 2 summers.
Bon, you had one of the things that need for storage at middle school and the Performing Arts Center and somewhere else. Where did that end up ending up?
We do have sort of an allowance in this for some storage, but rather than build expensive new construction heated storage, we'd probably look at what are some cold storage options to provide some additional storage sheds outside on the sites within the site number, but we still need to take a look at, for example, from a drama standpoint, where are we storing things currently right now, and are there less expensive options in building a new as part of that? So in terms of where are we right now, that is sort of the bulk of the options. We feel like this probably represents the issues, and so asking the group, what'd you see, what do you want to look at? We're very thankful to have these members come and present. I think it's always much more important, even though I've got some context with the school. I don't live in town anymore. My dad can pay the bill for that, but it's always important to have people represented here. And I do want to point out something that's unique. Very rarely do we get people who what's the right phrase I can have this, besides seniors? Mature. Very, very rarely do we have so many mature individuals as part of the process. Usually we hear people say, that's, I don't have a dog in the fight, I'm on a fixed income. And to have so many people in our group be people whose students went through the buildings, maybe their grandparents or grandchildren have gone through the buildings, still say this is what's important, I think is unique to this process. And so I did want to point that out.
Actively share their ideas, and then prioritizing numbers, starting with being part of the conversation, and then or second, or third.
No, it's, like I say, I've been involved in it for 50 years. During school board for, I think it's 10 years. And, anyhow, I just, I think it's time, there's a senior high school building that's been a real slow spot for it. And it's kept building stuff around it, just putting the court up. I think we had that part done, but the core, nothing's changed on that for 1964. So we should do it. But, yeah, it's true.
I appreciated your comment about the building maybe attracting people coming in. Because with declining enrollment, a possibility here, an attractive high school could prove a magnet for people, maybe instead of going to Malacca, coming here. So I think that's really needed right Yeah.
Any other questions?
Did you guys look at the parking at the intermediate school and primary school at all? Is any sort of a need?
Did come up as a discussion topic, but there was some pre-prioritization that went through in the group saying, we know that we've got challenges around that, but we've got bigger challenges to get a building, so let's focus on those areas as opposed to getting into the intermediate school or primary school. There's also some belief that the community just made investments in those buildings, and so going back and saying, and can you fix these things, may not be the right message to send. Other questions?
Well, we appreciate all you've done. Thank you.
What was I have one question, I guess. What was the whole the feel as a whole when you guys were discussing this throughout the process? Were people on board with this, or was it only a select few, or was it the majority of the people said we should do this, we need something done?
Honestly, I think that anybody in all the questions I was going to say anything negative about what they were doing, it was really surprising that we used to have these meetings. I'd be reserved. We get pretty nasty sometimes. And we just had them just go around and very, everybody on the same.
Yeah.
Part of that too, because the work in the high school stretches across so many areas, service areas, whether it be the industrial technology or the activities and the classroom education piece to it, and the robotics was getting space, and some of the other extracurriculars that were discussed. And so, the overall comment was it's really the whole package, and we'll be enticing to the community because it is a whole package, and we're really providing something to think about everyone in the community that would have an interest in coming to the incorporating this.
I think if there was any tension, it was probably people when we started to push on, well, do you want to prioritize? How can we prioritize this a little bit? Group saying, no, this has to be on the table, and this has to be on the table. You can't put one above the other. It's a complete package. And so that was probably the only real heated discussion was when something was discussed as, should we be doing this or not? And the pushback that came. Yeah, a lot of it, yeah. You know, I'm doing my job. I'm trying to be fiscally responsible. I think if I was having worked on a lot of these with different communities, I would say that when we started the options, there was a lot of skepticism at the first meeting in terms of, all right, Mr. Architect, how are you going to do this? We got a big problem here. And yeah, I think once we had a diagram that worked, that's when I kind of felt the room start to turn a little bit and people say, we could do this. Yeah, we could make this happen.
When you had an idea of how to get some stairwell out of the middle of the building without tearing the building down, that's what it's like.
When the tax impact sheet came out, what was the feeling of, were people surprised? Were they like, oh, okay. Was there any?
Actually, I think the big component for that was when someone asked, what was the tax impact of the average household 6 years ago when we did 30 million? And it was higher than what the average household would be for 50 million right now.
That's the point that we have to be, we have to fix that. I don't think any of us are naive enough to think, oh, it's going to fill this out here in some path.
Right.
If I'm, you know, sure to say something, but this is a need. We have to, it's going to take a lot of effort to get the information. I think the community will support it. I fully understand that. Yeah.
Right.
Of my 70 years.
I think when we look at the tax impact, because our original spreadsheet had like 30 million, 40 million, and when we look at the difference between 30 million and 40, 50, and we looked at, okay, we have to fit it into a 30 million and don't do the project, because we wouldn't be able, we couldn't agree on where you would draw that line. And how would you only do part of that project? Where would you put that priority? And so when we looked at the project, we said, well, it has to be that million to do this project to do it right.
You get to the where you have valuation in that part of it is important to them. They have people coming in and specifically talking about doing that. We have obviously the core of the building that needs to be there. And the intermediate school is my estimation to do is that is what we need to doing there is important as the high school. And that's got to be fixed.
You think that's a lot.
Yep, I was thinking that, yeah. $12 or $14 a month.
One a week.
The first meeting that I was on the student committee and after student, the first meeting that actually we were all given a handout of our district meeting. And I feel like to fulfill our district vision statement, this is something that we can do. Because we could be doing so much more for us than we do right now. Or we so many more opportunities for opportunities for different career exploration. We just can't do it now because we think we have to change that. So then something is very important. I think if we talk to the community members about how we operate today, instead of saying we're $50 million, you know, that's a very different topic. You know, is this not going to help us? What? For your household? maybe not cooking at home once a month instead of going out that one time. So people can see beyond the being right home and see where that looks like.
I started teaching in the building in 1971, and people would come to the building applying for a job at a factory. They thought it was Smith's. And yes, either way, yeah, yeah, well, that's how the students felt too, and the teachers.
Yeah, you'd host an event here, and the buses would drive around trying to find the school.
No, it, I'm, like I said, it's something we got all the time. I think we get that.
Right.
It's gonna have to last a lot longer.
The next steps, we'll present an abbreviated version of this at the community meeting, ask for feedback, and then we'll go back to you for discussion.
Does anyone have any questions? Any more questions?
We decided with
The community meeting is gonna be at the primary school. I mean, and this kind of expands on some of our issues. We can't even find a space within our own school district to have meetings because the spaces are so heavily utilized. Like, we couldn't find a space at the high school next Tuesday night to have a meeting because literally every meeting space, every gym, every spot is full. So then that's why we're gonna have it at the primary school next Tuesday. I think it's really going to be important for all of us to spread the word and encourage people to come. And, you know, we still want to hear the voices of the people. These are the assets of the people. These are the communities building. And what I admire so much is that, you know, the board is in the communities, you know, yes, we're talking about today, but we're also talking about future generations. We're talking about the next 50 years, right? And that's just, it's kind of awesome. So thank you for your work. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to take a short 5 to 10 minute recess, 5-minute recess. Take a short 5-minute recess and thank these presenters.
And stand up.
I'm glad you got the jacket. Graduated 68.
Yeah, I'm excited about meeting.
Sounds good to me. Yep, absolutely.
Snap your fingers and
Yeah.
They're all right there with you. You did a good job.
duct tape or hide or what
Oh,
was
Miss Muckingham got pie. Part of our fundraising was to donate money to vote.
Yeah.
Pie.
Yeah.
Ben was one of them.
one,
Well, yeah,
and then Sky.
and Sky, and then Miss Muckingham had the most money in the jar. She got pie. Yeah, no, it was. We were a little nervous because we only had like 3 days to work with, which was really hard. It was like that one in the wind. Yeah, it turned out
Good. Well, the $300.
yeah. We like doing that. It's fun to give back. Yeah, ice cream really sells. I don't know. You put ice cream out and kids will buy it. There's something about ice cream. We're like, because we did it last year. We're like, all right, we're doing 2 days of ice cream this year. Like, we're running around Sunday. But yeah, no, it worked out. Yes, I'm very excited. I'm like, whoa, classrooms you can just walk through and heating, cooling. Like, we've got a fan going every day in Mr. Moe's room. I can't wait to unplug that. And then you walk somewhere else and it's like 20 degrees and you're like, all right. But no,
Well, you
that
know what it's like to get around in those classrooms with all the backpacks.
oh my goodness. No, you can't. This car tripped over my backpack today. It's hard. But no, that was good to hear about it. I'm glad that we'll be recording this.
Yeah, so how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Looking forward to the end, I'm sure. Right?
Oh yes.
You're
You're almost there now. Whoa. Trying to throw me off. Gilderoy. Yeah, and it's really cool to hear about this new high school too.
I know.
I really that would be fun to see it. Right.
Where did the big
Hey, no, thank you so much. That was good to hear about. Oh my gosh, thank you.
Where are you gonna go to school?
Eau Claire, Wisconsin, for broadcast journalism. St. Cloud. I don't know. My sister goes there, and they have a TV studio on campus. Yeah.
Oh, Claire, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, St. Cloud, yeah. That's what we're getting.
Oh. Really? Oh no, I didn't hear about that.
Oh, yes, they win awards every year.
Really, that's so cool. No, yeah, I know it worked out kind of good. I was on my tour, and this lady approached me. She's like, "Oh, like I heard you're going to broadcast journalism," and she's like, "I work at the TV studio in Eau Claire, so like call me up in a couple of years." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So just kind of got excited going, but yeah, yeah. Thank you so
See what
much.
it's about.
Very much so.
All right. Well,
All right. The business.
let's get back into it. Enrollment. Michelle, I believe this is you.
All right, if you click on the first tab, it's, in December, we discussed our enrollment and, our worst case scenario dropping up to 125 by the end of the year. Emily puts this together for us, as you can see. Our K-12 total right now is still at 3,254, so we are holding here at mid-year. So we have, positive outlook that will be less than that 125 worst case scenario. Down at the bottom, we have the high school kind of broke out in a program kind of look, so you can see how many we are showing in the ALC and online, which you can see both those programs have upticked, which has helped maintain our enrollment. And then once you take all those numbers into consideration, it shows you our seat base, which is bringing our high school down under that 900 mark. So the next program analysis, this is looking at each of our programs, primary, intermediate, middle school, high school, online, ALC, from an October 1 view to year end from 2015-16. What I want you to do is, we know our elementary dropped, but I want you to focus on our high school for right now. Our October 1, if you go back to 2015-16, we had 1,042 and then 1,009. And part of that, of course, had to do with our online kids just choosing. We were at 1,022 last year, 1,003. So we have always broke 1,000 students, even with our online program. And this year we opened our seat-based at 959. So that was kind of a shocking number for me to look at. So I just want you aware that, as I said before, I don't want to blame all of our enrollment woes on just our kindergarten coming in. Certainly that is part of it, but it is not all of it.
I don't know if it was necessarily students leaving the district though. I think wasn't this year's ninth grade class a smaller class and last year's seniors a bigger class?
I don't know.
No, they were closer together.
Were they?
in
Okay.
size, yeah.
Yeah, last year's class was pretty small.
Okay.
So it was just an aha.
Maybe I'm
It doesn't
thinking
change where we're at. I just wanted to just show you so that there's more than one way to look at this. Also, this is the same sheet that we looked at in
No.
December for our estimates on enrollment. So currently our revised budget is down 105 students from our projected of 3,300 students. So we've carried that forward and come up with a couple options that we'll look at later that will show you what, if we're at the best, what we think is best, our best scenario versus what might be more of our worst case scenario and what that does to our financial picture. But Jason and I this morning just did a simple exercise and we basically came up around that 3,100 number, which is the average of all of the different looks. But as you can see, the 2021, we got anywhere from we're going to be at 3,131 to we could be down to 3,066. So what's that number? The average of those are all totaling up to about that 3,100 number. So, and then we looked at it from, well, here's our seniors going out, we're estimating 200 kindergartners. Here's what's the difference between those two numbers, and it was 75, which puts us in the ballpark of what we're looking at from our revised to next year.
And
So,
then continuing on to class size. Have anything else, Michelle?
no, I don't, I was just gonna ask if they had any questions.
Just
anything
one,
else they
Michelle,
wanted just to look at.
because everyone keeps talking about enrollments dropping everywhere because of the national birth rate, et cetera. So schools in our area that, I think Foley's an anomaly because they're getting a lot of open enrollment out of Sauk Rapids and St. Cloud. But other than that, schools in our area, are they all having some of the dips like we're having?
Well, we know Malacca is going down, Cambridge is also, North Branch. I haven't heard anything about, the Elk River School District.
So in other words, it is kind of a trending thing right at this part of society, et cetera. Okay.
Zimmerman, where are they? You know?
They're at Oak River.
They're in Elk River School District as
Oh,
well. They're not on, they're part of that big.
yeah, I thought they might individually.
You know, and Michelle has said it many times, but she uses the word worst case scenario, and that's what we're gonna present to you as worst case scenario. You know, our hope is things won't roll out worst case scenarios. You can see, we have 3,254 students in our district, 3,254. But then you need to minus the PSEO from that, so it's actually 15 less. And then we do have some part-time PSEOs. When we're gonna project minus 120 or what,
105.
105. Now that's anticipating if the trend goes this year like it has the last 5 or 10 years, we will lose students between now and the end of the year. And again, so we're going to use 105 as a worst case scenario number as we move on. But as you can see, currently, we are not there. And we are in February 4th.
Jason's gonna go through current, what our current class sizes look like.
So I did have an attachment there. This is taking a look at our current class sizes in where they're at within the guidelines. So if you open that up and take a look at the top, it's the primary and intermediate school. Currently, our kindergarten guideline is 19 to 21. We have 198 students with 2 sections of Spanish immersion. One of them is 22, one of them is 21. Our total number of sections of kindergarten is 10, which comes to our average then of 19.8 for the grade level. I did do a separate calculation to see what the Spanish immersion numbers do for our English sections. Unfortunately, I didn't put that on the sheet, but for kindergarten, it does stay at 19.3 for our English speaking sections or teaching sections. When we look at first grade, we are actually right at the bottom of our range. 20.6 is an average. When we pull the 23 and 23 Spanish immersion sections, it actually drops it to 20.1. So we're definitely on the low end of the first grade range. Second grade, we're sitting at 21.25, which is already below the parameters that we had set. If we pull out the Spanish immersion sections, they're sitting at 21.4 as an average. So again, it's below. Third grade, we're actually in range. When we pull out the Spanish sections there, it does bring it up to 25.3, which does put it on the top of our range. When we look at fourth grade, we are below the range as a whole. If we pull out the 38 Spanish immersion students, it would bring it to 24.9, which is on the lower end of our range. And then in fifth grade, we currently don't have Spanish immersion sections, so that does run us at 25.1, again, toward the lower end of our range. When we start looking at our middle school numbers, our sixth grade, we have 250 total students. We do run 10 core sections, so that's your math, language arts, social studies, those areas. So we are running at approximately a 25 student average. Again, their range is 25 to 30. Seventh and eighth grade are in the 27.1 and 26.3 as an average class size. When we look at the high school, that's obviously based more on registered courses. And so when you take a look at some of these areas such as art and business, you can see there's less students totally enrolled in those courses. But again, that's because there's lots of electives that they're choosing from. Then they have the number of sections. So like our art classes average almost 25 per class. Business classes are just at 23.8. English classes are around 26.7. Our math courses are a little bit low. I did talk with Ms. Buckenham on this. They know that intentionally they did that. They were trying to do some things with their math instruction. These numbers do include our AP honors courses and then our core courses. It is not including any special education sections, which typically would be lower. So that is an area that they do recognize could do some adjusting in the future. Our PE health class looks nice as far as that goes, but again, that's an area that probably could even have more students in it. The reffing class, which is great, but I think there's 15 kids in the class, so it does bring that number down a little bit. And then our science, social studies, and language arts, or world language are all right in that 26 to 27 range. Again, the high school ranges are 25 to 30, so we do have some room to do some adjusting as we look to the future. I did include what the total number of students on all programs are by grade level. So we do have 275 ninth graders in all of our programs, so it is a decent sized class. So, any questions on class size? Michelle, back to you for budget.
So fun. So, looking at the revised, budget, the first page is a summary of the general fund and food service. On this page, we're only gonna talk about, food service. Currently is at 1.7 in revenues we're projecting and expenditures of 1.8. We're looking at approximately 40,000, negative 40,000 in a variance there. The reason, that variance is there is we've got capital purchases at this time. We bought the vending machine type food service where you put in your lunch money and it's going to take out your sandwich meal or your salad meal or whatever you choose. And then also putting in a hotline in our current express area because more of our students want hot lunch, and with the structure of the high school, we can't get them too fast enough. So, the building fund, Fund 6, we'll talk about community ed separate. The building fund, we're estimating about 2 million here. It may be a little more, it could be a little less. It depends on how much of our family center HVAC project falls in this school year versus next school year because July 1 is that cutoff. The debt service fund, of course, we collect our taxes in order to pay that plus 5% and we pay the bill. So we just paid all those bills. So there's nothing different there than the prior budget. If you click on the next tab, that's where we get into the detail of Fund 1. The LTFM restricted area is slightly changed. Part of that has to do with the fact that we have planned for projects and we had them in last school year, but they actually didn't get done until after July 1, so they needed to move to this school year. And then we're seeing an uptick in projects that cost us $1,000 to $5,000 in cost for repairs. And some of those maintenance things that you do each year that are costly, we're seeing an uptick in those costs. So we did add about $25,000 to that line. Right now, our emergency fund, which is typically, huge projects, $10,000, $15,000 ticket item, we are holding steady right now on that. We've used some of it, but not all of it. So that might be okay, but we've still got a few months to go here. Operating capital, there's no change in what we budgeted there. That's still the same. Staff development, we tidied that up as far as salaries go and a couple small line items. So we're looking at a variance there of negative 44,000. Q comp, we always plan to spend most of what is there. Typically we do not. We don't make all our goals as an example, so that money doesn't go out. So we have a pretty good fund balance down there of 266,000 for that area. Technology assigned, that's just our insurance area, as I call it. Parents pay their $25 or $30, I forget what it is, and we maintain their device. So we have not changed that budget either. For expenses, program initiatives is the same. That is where we hired the online coordinator and a Spanish immersion teacher out of. Activity account assigned, that's our typical 500,000. Just so you are aware, when we close the books this year, we will have 3 activities: National Honor Society, Student Council, and I'm drawing a blank. FFA. That are what we consider true activity accounts. That means they are ran by students for students. So they have a structure: president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. We will have 2 fund balances in our activity account, which we see it as Fund 10 in our office, but it's really Fund 10. There will be another restricted code for them, as their funds must be restricted by law. That was new as of, we were told about it in June. Well, actually, in May at Masco, it came out for the first time, and then, at our year end in June, they went into more details on what that would result in. We could have a few more, activities in the district that qualify under that. But we started at the high school, to switch them to the new, format. So they'll have, there's restrictions on what they can spend, how they can spend it, just like the general fund. So. Then that brings us to the unassigned, category, with the biggest change, of course, being our enrollment. We have some other changes in there, but enrollment is affecting it. And then, of course, we have now put in our new salary structure for, teachers and the staff that are settled, with estimates, for those that are not settled. Our estimated expenses right now are 35,600,000. Revenues coming in just slightly over 34 million there, with a variance of 1.4. Our original budget in the unassigned area was a negative 940,000. And that is typical for us, over the last most of my tenure here. But when, we have gotten to the revised budget, that number has gone down each year. We usually have a better looking picture at this point. This time around, we have gone to a worst. It's not as rosy as it was last year and the previous year, because our enrollment, went the other direction. The good news on this point is we do have a fund balance to carry us. And, after I go through community ed, I got hard copies here to hand out to those board members that were not in finance. Cause I didn't wanna publish those negative numbers quite yet. So if you go to revise community ed, if you recall at the beginning of our projected budget, we were hoping to be relatively flat, which is what we have been, in 18 and 19. But when we started to review the budget, as we do every year, it became clear that our Tiger Club is not functioning quite as well as we had thought it would be. And that also, so Fund 4, most of that negative 82,000 is going to hit that restricted community ed budget, which would bring down that fund balance. So we're working with Gwen, and we have a staff member who just resigned, but we were working with him to determine what might be going on there. We've determined a couple of things. One thing, our wages keep going up. We have not increased our rates to parents. So I asked when was the last time we raised those rates? And she indicated to me, well, they've been the same since I've been here. So she's been here longer than I have, so it's been 10 years. So that is a number one has to be looked at, and we're looking at summer session. The other thing is we're staffing a little light. Or heavy, yeah. Okay, great. There's a 15-to-1 ratio, of course. Some of the days that we've looked at, we've been running about a 7-to-1. So we've got to look at how we've got to be a little bit tighter on our staffing. So we're working really hard right now with community ed and our Fund 1 to determine how best we can keep us financially healthy. That's our goal. The other restricteds in this area are relatively flat and do not have no cause for concern. So we're just looking really at that community ed restricted and what we're running for revenue against expenses. And part of our issue there, we have a levy that comes in behind, 2 years behind when it actually, the expenses occur. We get a base and then we have a road. If it goes down, then we get less 2 years later. If it goes up, we get more 2 years later. But it's a 2-year cycle, and we went through a couple years where it was relatively flat. Then we had a year that actually decreased. And so now, next year, they're gonna take that levy back, so we've gotta be able to cash flow that. Any questions on this very quick overview of the revised budget?
I just want one.
And you're passing on to the rest of the board members too, that didn't have them. I think I copied them.
Just, I guess, a summary and I think some important pieces. For those that, we went in really deep detail at our finance committee. For those that aren't on that, I would be interested if you are to sit down with you and go into this in more detail, because there are some complexities to this. But when we adopted this year's budget last June is when we adopted it. We adopted a budget that worst case scenario, and we always budget conservatively. We indicated that we would go a negative $940,000. We adopted a budget that was $940,000 deficit spending. As we always try to do is we try and underspend our budget, and we knew that if we would do a good job administering the budget, we would have a trend of expending about 98% of the budget, not 100%, which would have been about a negative 232, which then would have gone eaten into our fund balance, if you will. As we are presenting a revised budget to you, not this month, but next month in March, it will actually change from a negative 940 to a negative 1,473,000. Okay. Our intent is to underspend that and expend about 98%, which would be the negative 759. Okay. And if that were to happen, then we would dip into our fund balance $759,000. Our fund balance is currently at 5.36 million. Right. So it is. You can see in this handout, and we kind of have it played out on what are some of the things that we're going to have to consider doing for next year's budget to be able to stay at a 10% fund balance as we move forward, which it does appear, it doesn't only appear, we know that we will need to make some reductions in our expenditures for next school year. We haven't determined exactly what that amount will be at this point.
So we've got two case scenarios in front of you, and as most of you are aware, typically we have four, our very worst case scenario, and we have three others. I've simplified this down quite a bit, mainly because we know the student drop is already there. And that kind of hurts you when you don't know it up front, and we didn't know it up front, so this is where we're at. But on top of the loss of students, so you'll see we ran the loss of 43 and a loss of 75 in 2021. We're going to see a basic skills or compensatory reduction of 200,000. We will receive a Rum River payback that we put in this current year's budget. That money, of course, we won't get back 2 years in a row because they're basically giving us our money back. And we have a Safe Schools one-time amount of money that we, instead of spending it on things, we are going to offset it with salary this year. So that money is only one time from the government unless we see some legislative, there's talk that they might extend that. And of course, that would be wonderful. I can tell you the Rum River for sure isn't coming back. We won't be able to add that back in, and we will not be able to add basic skills, and those numbers are hard already. So the question is, where is that negative going to end the next year? Or, you know, it's possible it could surprise us and be the other way. But right now, if we don't plan for some kind of drop, we would not have enough money in the bank 2 years from now to pay our bills. And the last thing we want to do, and I know we always talk about that 10% fund balance, but I'm not worried about the 10% fund balance because I'm worried about if we continue to drop, being completely out of money. So, and when you continue to drop each year, like the neighboring districts that have been dropping the last several years, you get to a point where each classroom pays for the teacher, but it also pays for your custodians, your secretaries, your administrative structure. And whether people believe that or not, we really need those pieces in our schools to run. You need the operations side of it, and if you don't have the additional funds that a whole classroom of kids gives you, that's when you have to go out and ask the taxpayers for more money. And of course, we know it's hard to pass operational levies, so. And the earliest we could even do that is 2021, because you can only run a referendum in November.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what she's saying is if we don't make some adjustments, yeah, right, so some adjustments,
Toilet.
we would go broke. But of course, we will make adjustments like we do every year. And, you know, a term that sometimes we use is just right sizing our district. As we have a decline in certain areas, then we need to staff proportionately with the number of students. If you don't make those adjustments every year, you will go broke in a hurry. And you have those class sizes and you see the ranges. And I would encourage you to just, you know, you can do the math in 5 seconds by just taking, you know, the kindergarten numbers that we have this year and just assume that same number will be in first grade next year. And you can take the range, the high end of the range and divide it, and then you can see, well, how many sections would we have next year compared to how many sections we have this year, right? And you would see, you know, what a natural adjustment that might be in terms of right sizing and staying proportionate with your student enrollment. And certainly all areas will need to be looked at. I anticipate that, you know, every single day, like we're doing tons of work related to this. So there'll be just ongoing information as we get it. We'll provide it to you. I am assuming that next board meeting, we will spend a lot of time on budget again. And pretty much every board meeting that we have for the next couple of months will be, this same information will be in front of you several more times.
I just want you to note on the expense side right now, all we show is the salary increases. As with anything, there's other areas that we don't control those expenses. We talked to Rum River today. Forgot to mention that at finance, but we had a long conversation with them because they control that pot of money over there, and we're asking them to look at everything on that. And we have transportation contract, so things like that we haven't added to that expense line.
I want the board to know that I have, about 2 or 3 months ago, I had an opportunity to speak in front of our entire teaching staff, and I was able to share with them our enrollment and our projections, and, you know, share with them, you know, what does that mean for revenue and the adjustments piece. So, you know, I tried to give them I guess, some information so they weren't blindsided. So I feel pretty good that our staff is aware of that. We have recently put a freeze on spending for current year to ensure that we spend that 98% or less, which is really important. And I will be crafting up some communications to our staff so that they are aware of where we currently are. And, you know, I hesitate to give, you know, any real targeted numbers until the finance committee and the board provides direction to us on what those are. But I feel like I need to give the staff an idea, you know.
You need approval or direction from the board for the right sizing of the district as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're gonna have to figure out, you know, what is the number? What is our target in terms of where we want to get to,
Mhm.
right? And that's where the board really will need to give us some direction on what that is. I mean, we know that we have to make some, and quite honestly, even if we weren't in budget reduction or right sizing or mode like that, I think we would be foolish if we didn't make the yearly adjustments proportionally based on class size. I mean, so some of these things we would be doing anyways. Any school district would have to.
Mhm.
Have we ever looked? I mean, I know I asked you this one time. Have we ever looked at how many students Spanish immersion actually brings in? I mean, we're looking to cut money from the budget, but we're going to spend $300,000 on Spanish teachers next year, is what the budget is. But we're cutting, or realigning, or whatever you want to call it, money out of the budget when we already have those teachers in place. Are we actually bringing students from other districts to our district with Spanish immersion? And if we are, is it a significant number? Because I do not think that it is. I think that the people that are in Spanish immersion are already in our district, and they're not going to leave, because where are they going to go to a Spanish immersion to continue their program? They're not going to go to Zimmerman. They don't have it. They're not going to go to Malacca. They don't have it. Cambridge doesn't have it. Foley doesn't have it. So they're going to stay in our district whether we have Spanish immersion or not. And we've already spent, I mean, I know it's money already gone, but it's like close to $2 million since the inception of Spanish immersion.
Well, you know, I have conversations with lots of parents, and, you know, I just have those to go by, you know, and I certainly have had several comments over the years that, you know, we are sending our kid here because of Spanish enrollment, Spanish immersion. Now, yeah, certainly not all of the students, but I think there are some, and I don't have a hard number on that.
Mm-hmm.
I do know when you take a look at like the class size piece, right now in our kindergarten, in our first grade Spanish immersion,
Right.
and I think in our second grade, all of those Spanish immersions have higher class size than our English sections.
Right.
The only ones that don't are now in our intermediate, and we have plans to multi-age so that we will combine, and we will have the same number of sections there.
Right. I'm just saying that the teachers that this is kind of piggybacks on it too. The teachers that we have teaching these Spanish immersion classes, some of them are here for a short term. We've gone through an ungodly amount of Spanish teachers. The teachers that we could potentially be getting rid of out of our district to keep Spanish in our district are people that are longtime residents and are invested in our community. And now we're going to tell them, sorry, you're out.
And I understand your perspective. Like when I, like where my head is when we go through this right now, I try and look at it as like the position, not the person. And then but I think that I'm hearing, you know, you're looking at the impact of the person as it relates to when these reductions would potentially happen.
Kind of too. And in the past, we've had to hire a Spanish teacher for $68,000 when we could have hired, if we had to hire just a regular classroom teacher, we could have hired a $42,000 teacher. Because those are, I mean, I'm not going to say they're a dime a dozen, but there's way more regular classroom teachers than there are Spanish immersion teachers.
We had the discussion at community ed, and community ed is probably going to drop its pre-K or its early childhood Spanish because it was less than 10 kids. And of those kids that were in there, they were all residents. And the survey was that they would be coming to the school district anyway. They did not come because of Spanish immersion. And this question has been asked a couple of times, is how much open enrollment have we gotten off the Spanish immersion? And it's always been kind of, well, we'll look into it. And we've never gotten the numbers. And I know about 4 parents that were students of mine who absolutely love Spanish immersion, but they were graduates of Princeton. Their parents were graduates of Princeton. They're, like Eric says, they're not going to go anywhere. So I think we really have to look at the impact on what is it bringing in and is it cost effective? If we're going to be looking at all sorts of things and whether they are cost effective or not. That's not saying we should change it or do, but just, have the info.
Well, I respect everyone's opinion on the board. I really do. I can just tell you that my perspective is, I wasn't here when the board made the decision to go in this direction, but my sense is that you wanted to, find some innovative programming that would set our district apart
We were
from
up in our game.
other
That's what we
school
were doing.
districts.
We were up in our game.
And I feel like you have accomplished that. And I feel like the program, has gone through, lots of, bumps along the way to get it up and rolling. And from my perspective is we're finally starting to figure it out. And, I don't know. I mean, we've been doing it, what now, for 4 years, 5 years. And I guess I don't know. I mean, you guys were on the board when you made the decision to move forward. We're just trying to administer it to, make it work. And I think when you jump into it, and there's a lot of things that needs to be figured out along the way. And we're just trying to do that every single day. We're really proud of the program, but we're proud of all of our programs. I mean, we love equally all of our programs.
Right. And I get it. I get what you're saying. And I wasn't on the board, and I just know that the majority of those students you'd have regardless. It's if you offered it as an elective, you would have the same amount of kids in there. Like if you could offer it as an after school program,
You could say that about
those kids could do it.
though, too.
Right.
You
Right.
could say about football programs.
But it's the same thing as if you only have 2 options, if you have in high school, if you have a shop class as an option or you have a fax class as an option, the kids have to take one of the 2. They're going to have to take it. I mean, either one.
Are we trying to provide more opportunity?
Is it providing
Be-
more
be
opportunity
Better
though?
than
It's,
our surrounding schools, or are we trying to just do the status quo? like
Well,
our-
then as the flip
well, we're
side,
trying to balance
know,
a budget too though.
Oh, I get that.
Yeah.
I
Well,
get
yeah,
that.
but as the flip
But
side,
it's,
I'm sorry, I'm talking over you. You finished yet?
I mean, having a second language is just so critical, I think, to the kids.
Well, why be cut
I
German?
see so many other cultures that do it and see the benefit of it, and I think we would be doing a disservice to our kids if we were to do that.
Like I said though, like
Pull it out.
with the inception of Spanish immersion, German kind of went by the wayside.
And French went by the
French, too.
wayside before it.
So,
French.
I mean, we brought in Spanish immersion, but we cut French and German, yes.
Yeah, when we started Spanish
So-
in the middle school,
I think they were
that's when
cut
our
though
other
because
world
there wasn't
languages
people
started to
taking it.
deteriorate.
Yeah, there's so many complexity to this conversation because there's other factors with, believe me, high school, all of our high schools would love to be offering German and French and we cannot find a teacher to teach those classes. And that's why schools have been forced to really eliminate some of those options because they can't run them, because they can't find qualified teachers to do it. You know, I think,
Well, I think we need to caution ourselves by thinking that we have to look at this as every activity, anything that's outside the norm of the everyday school should be cost effective or making us money. I don't think that that's the right way to approach.
But is everything costing us $2 million from the inception,
Well, we would have had to have teachers for those kids anyways.
which we already have,
New programs.
Well, we
always
would have
cost.
had to have that many sections.
right? But we already had the teachers that were cheaper. We had the teachers that were I mean, it's done with. So we already had the teachers in place
To teach
that were
Spanish
cheaper.
immersion.
No, to teach English that were cheaper than the Spanish immersion teachers that we hired, but they got cut for Spanish immersion, and then we were hiring $60,000 teachers. So whatever, we can move on. I'm done with my rant.
well, I'll get the board as much information as they want on this topic, and, we'll just, like I said, we're trying to run the best program that we can for both English and Spanish, and we're proud of both, and, we've made a lot of progress in the Spanish immersion.
Can I change the subject?
Sure.
Please.
The hiring freeze, and the purchase, are you, reaching out to maybe staff or whatever of how to tighten it down now? Is that a good idea to give them? I mean, I taught in that building. I know all the waste that was going on in there. Like if somebody was said, hey, maybe you could help us solve this problem. I don't know. Does people start picking at either people's jobs, or you use 10 papers today when you should have only used one? I mean, I don't know, but I know you're trying to do the big thing by saying, okay, we're spending freeze and hiring freeze, but you have a lot of positive culture things going. Can you rally the troops and between now and I don't know.
About
Is that dumb?
future years, and well, no, I don't think it's dumb. I think that everything, we got to look at everything. I mean, like for example, all of these things they're freezes, but they're somewhat of a soft freeze because the exception to that is, okay, if you're a fax teacher, third try, you're teaching a class that that's only offered third try, and you have to buy food for the lesson. Yeah, I mean the things that are required for the lessons, so those things, but that's going to have to be run through a filter, and at least they'll have to go and ask for that and get it signed off on, and we will do that. It's just we don't want, say, boy, I have a bunch of money left in my supply budget. Let's stock up for next year. We're not, and I don't want to generalize that happens, but it could. And so we're trying to put a freeze on supplies, a freeze on any capital expenditures. The hiring piece, that's going to be case by case basis. Obviously, if a teacher left, we would need a teacher, but there's some positions that, I'll share an example. We have in the community ed, we have a resignation. We're going to try to make it through the rest of the year to try and, fulfill those duties. And that's just going to be a case by case kind of basis. In terms of rallying the troops for the future, I think strategically we have to find a way to do that. One of the biggest things is our copying and our printing and our paper use in the school district. My assumption is when the one-to-one computing environment was pitched to the board, they probably talked about the fact that you may see some cost savings with less paper use and less, purchases of textbooks and those kinds of things. The fact of the matter is we haven't seen that much reduction in paper use. And until we get firm in our resolve, to say, listen, we're not going to spend as much money on paper and printers and copying. So that's where things like that, I think people would rally around. We just need to be more intentional in trying to make that happen.
You're watching me snicker over here because way back in the dark ages when I started here, and it was the old junior high, which is now Crystal Courts, was reading in the obituaries, and a person passed away who at one time was the superintendent's secretary. And when you needed supplies, you had to go downstairs and go through her to get them. And honest to God, I need staples. How many things are you stapling? Well, I got 30 kids, and she would pull out a row of staples. Not the box, but a row. Can I have a red pen? No, you got one last month. That's how it was. That's why I was laughing when Sue said, you know, oh no, I'd love getting a box of red pens. I could use them all month, you know. Never mind. But we lived through that and we survived.
You
But I
started
also
there and
think
you
it's
might
good
wind
that
up there.
you're going
Oh
to
God.
that you're going to communicate, because it's a painful process for staff.
Yeah.
And I think it's good that it's like that you're going to be really open about it, because it has sometimes been in the past been so secretive.
Well, and we've been trying to prep people for a while now, and, you know, I wanted to prepare our teachers, and I didn't have to be super explicit, you know, but all I needed to do is put the numbers up and share that, and they know, right? So they know that this is
Yeah,
coming.
well, I know they appreciate the transparency, so it's good.
There's some hard decisions that are gonna have to be made coming up
Mhm.
very quick.
Yeah, I mean,
Welcome to the board.
when you take a look at these class size numbers and the ratios, I mean, you will see very easily
Right.
that if we just maintained the very respectable ranges that we had, but we stayed in the high end, there would be a large number of reductions that just would naturally happen. I think the hard question will be, you know, if the board and if we are prepared to go to that level, because on paper, mathematically, proportionally wise, you know, that's what you would do. You know, but we knew last year we could have went deeper too, right?
Mhm.
And we've been able to not, because we've had a fund balance to roll the dice a little bit.
Yeah, mathematically, it makes sense to, like, as long as we're not increasing the ranges, which I don't think we are. It doesn't sound like you guys want to, but as long as we're not increasing the class size ranges, I think it makes sense to try to go towards the higher end instead of the lower end.
We've got lots of room to wiggle.
I never thought I'd say that either.
Well, and I'll let you look at that for yourself, but it's a high number of staff
Yeah.
that would be reduced.
I think, like the community ed, not rehiring that, I think it's easy to look at this and say, well, there we go with teachers, but I do think it needs to be across,
It does. Yeah.
as well. And again, being creative in how that can happen.
Yeah, with every negative, you try and find any silver lining or positive, and, you know, any positive that I can see is this is gonna force us to really look at every single nickel that we spend, and we are gonna have to be more efficient with our utilization of dollars, and I think that's okay to do. It's actually an important thing to do.
All right. Is there any more questions? I guess I had one question quick. Was that budget on 3,100 students? Was that the number for next year?
There's two scenarios there, minus.
Minus 75, minus 43. All right.
Do you want these back, Michelle?
Yeah, you can leave them.
Okay, let's move on to
You
the.
can keep them.
Oh, keep 'em? Okay.
Is there any more questions?
No.
All right, move on to the summary of changes. For policy there, Howard, do you want to go through that
It's
quick?
basically pretty simple. No changes. One's going on to get the right numbers and compare the two. I would ask you to look at the online learning and to look at it carefully and read Barb's memo. There was a lot of work that went into it. I think we answered all the questions, but if some of you have questions, direct them to Barb or to Eric, because Eric's on policy, and we'll get the answers by the next time we meet. We have it for the second meeting.
All right.
I had a couple questions on is there any way we can get a list of the online providers that are approved by MDE? I was just kind of curious.
I can do probably a Google search right now and see if I can find it.
Oh, okay. So just pretty easy to find, okay.
Anything else, Chad? Okay.
No, I'm good.
Does anyone else have any questions? All right, there's no additions to the agenda. We have the community meeting next Tuesday at the primary
What time
school,
is that at? Is
6
that at
o'clock.
6? Okay.
Anyone's interested in joining that, that'd be great.
Now, I probably should post that as a meeting, huh?
Yep,
We'll have more than.
We
3 or
should
4
be
people.
there.
just
Yeah.
post it, just in case we
Yeah.
all show up. I can only be there for about an hour, so.
Well, that's not a board meeting, that's a community meeting with Wold, et cetera. I mean,
Yeah.
That's not
Right.
our meeting.
But we're taking public comment, so you're gonna want to be there if you can.
Yeah, but I'm going, as a posting thing, I mean, it's not illegal to a special meeting.
But if if more than 3 of us are there, we have to post it.
Well, let's just,
We're talking
we'll
about
check
school
with
stuff.
MSBA tomorrow,
February 11th.
but we'll probably be safe than sorry. If they,
Yeah,
if they
I do
tell
this
us
just to be safe.
explicitly
If
that
we're
no,
talking
you don't
about
need to,
school
we
things,
won't,
then we
but
should post it. If
probably
we're talking about golfing or something, we don't have to post it. But. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A motion by Jim, second by Deb. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I'm gonna send, Chad, your question on online providers